A detective was staring at a grainy photograph, and his eyes just widened as the truth sort of flashed across the screen. It was one of those moments that just takes your breath away. So I'm Marcus Reed, a former investigative reporter who spent about a decade chasing America's darkest cold cases. It's been a wild ride, let me tell you. In this video, you're gonna see how a single strand of DNA basically upended a legend, why luck kinda eclipsed skill, and what the victims' families still have to endure. It's a pretty tough story to hear. The following story contains real events and people. By the way, names have been altered where necessary to protect privacy, just so you know. The breakthrough came when investigators uploaded DNA from the case to a public genealogy website and found a match. It was a real game changer. Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested after investigators used genetic genealogy to match DNA from crime scenes to a relative, which is just crazy when you think about it. Source: The New York Times. He was staring breath shallow as the lab report glowed on his monitor, an ordinary line of code that linked a 1970s nightmare to a suburban dad's backyard, which is just wild. The image of a man who had vanished into the shadows of the 1970s and 1980s suddenly had a name, a face, a family tree. It was like, wow. The Golden State Killer case had become this mythic scar on the West Coast, a string of home invasions, rapes, and murders that haunted neighborhoods for decades. It's just heartbreaking. Victims' faces would flicker across newsreels, each one a reminder that the horror was still unfinished business, you know. Source: CBS News. What made the arrest startling wasn't the brilliance of a seasoned profiler. It was the randomness of a public database, which is kinda cool and kinda scary at the same time. Investigators uploaded the suspect's DNA, watched the algorithm churn, and a distant cousin's profile lit up the screen. Luck, not a seasoned sleuth, cracked the case, which is just amazing. But the ripple effect of that lucky match reached far beyond California. It's pretty incredible, actually. In 2020, a woman named Mary Jo Bailey was sentenced to life for a 1985 murder after DNA from a relative entered a genealogy database, finally giving a grieving family closure, which is just a huge deal. Source: NPR. Across the Atlantic, a discarded coffee cup from a 1991 crime scene yielded a DNA profile that matched a distant relative in a public genealogy database, ending a 30-year cold case in the UK. It's just mind-blowing. Source: BBC. Even a stray cigarette butt in 1992 became the key to a homicide that had stalled for nearly 3 decades. It's crazy what can happen. Cross-checking that DNA against a genealogy site identified the perpetrator, proving that chance discoveries can rewrite criminal history, which is just wild. Source: The Washington Post. For the families who have lived with unanswered questions, each revelation is a double-edged sword. It's a real mixed bag of emotions. Relief mixes with the terror of knowing that a monster could have been lurking in plain sight, hidden by the very technology that now exposed him. It's just a lot to take in. Their nights are still restless, their calendars still marked with anniversaries that never truly end, which is just heartbreaking. The detective's disbelief, captured in that single frame, is the doorway to a larger story. It's a real interesting one. How a twist of fate and uploaded DNA profile turned the tide on one of America's most infamous serial offenders, and why that same twist now forces us to confront the ethics of digging into anyone's genetic past. It's a lot to think about. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of luck, science, and the lingering shadows that still haunt the victims' families. It's gonna be a wild ride. The truth is stranger and more unsettling than any headline ever hinted, so buckle up. The weight of a cold case often sits on a single clue, one fragment that, if seen in the right light, can rewrite a decade-long mystery. In 3 emblematic investigations, sheer happenstance turned that fragment into a breakthrough. Case 1: A Locker's Forgotten Evidence. In the early 2000s, detectives reopened a series of assaults that had stalled for years. An old storage locker used to archive evidence from multiple scenes was slated for decommissioning. While cataloging its contents, a sealed envelope containing a hair sample was found, its label faded, its origin long obscured. The sample had sat untouched, its potential untapped, until a new DNA analysis platform was applied. The resulting profile was uploaded to a public genealogy database, where a distant relative's match surfaced, pointing directly to Joseph James DeAngelo. The arrest that followed shocked the nation, showing how a misplaced piece of evidence could become the linchpin of a massive case. Source: The New York Times. Case 2: A Coffee Cup Stray DNA. Half a world away, a seemingly innocuous coffee cup was discarded on a London sidewalk in 2019. Years earlier, a 30-year-old murder left investigators with no forensic leads. When the cup was retrieved for a routine environmental scan, a faint DNA profile emerged. Rather than matching a suspect, the profile aligned with a distant relative in the same genealogy database that had solved the American case. The connection led police to a suburban garden where the victim's remains were finally uncovered. The unexpected match turned a routine waste item into a forensic goldmine. Source, BBC. Case 3, a gamer's offhand tip. In a quiet suburb of the Midwest, a teenage gamer posted a cryptic message on an online forum about a hidden stash he'd heard about from an old friend. The post was dismissed as idle chatter, until a seasoned investigator monitoring the board for any leads flagged it for follow-up. The gamer's description of a particular cul-de-sac matched a location tied to a 1992 homicide that had long evaded resolution. Acting on the tip, detectives searched the area and uncovered a concealed cache containing the victim's personal effects and a discarded cigarette butt. DNA from the butt, cross-checked against a genealogy site, identified the perpetrator, closing the case after 3 decades. Source, The Washington Post. These 3 stories, disparate in geography and method, share a single thread: serendipity. A misfiled envelope, a tossed cup, an offhand comment, each seemed insignificant until technology and persistence converged. The common denominator is not the brilliance of a single detective, but the chance alignment of evidence, databases, and an open mind. The Golden State Killer's capture, Mary Jo Bailey's conviction, and the UK coffee cup revelation all underscore a growing truth in modern policing. The past is increasingly searchable, and the smallest oversight can become the key that unlocks it. When investigators let randomness into the equation by revisiting forgotten lockers, by testing discarded items, or by listening to an unexpected voice, they create the conditions for breakthroughs that once seemed impossible. In the end, the stories remind us that cold cases are not static puzzles. They are living archives, waiting for the moment when chance meets the right tool. It is that intersection: random tip, stray DNA, misplaced evidence, that turns disbelief into resolution and turns the detective's stare into a story of hope. So the night the case finally cracked, it's kinda crazy, actually. A junkyard worker picked up a rust-stained glove from a heap of discarded tires and handed it to an officer, unaware that this fabric was about to unlock a decades-old nightmare. The glove, which had skin cells from an unknown source on it, was sent to the lab, and what they found was a DNA profile that didn't match anyone in the existing criminal databases. Talk about a dead end, right? But instead of giving up, the profile was uploaded to a public genealogy website, the same one that had earlier helped solve some pretty cold cases and turn them into headlines. And then, within hours, a distant relative popped up, a man whose family tree intersected with the DNA of the Golden State Killer, which led investigators straight to Joseph James DeAngelo. Source, CBS News. The detective who was standing over the evidence got a cold shiver, not because of the horror of the crimes, but because of how random the whole breakthrough was. He told a reporter later that the moment the glove arrived, he realized the case had been solved by accident. I mean, it wasn't like they were meticulously hunting for clues or anything. Source, The New York Times. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. By the way, there was this one case in the UK where a discarded coffee cup helped solve a 30-year-old murder, and another case where a stray cigarette butt ended a 1992 homicide. Source, BBC. Source, The Washington Post. The detective's voice was shaking as he described the scene. His words just cut through the sterile lab air. He said, "We were looking for a needle in a haystack, and the needle turned out to be a piece of junk." Families who had been living with unanswered questions for years gathered in this modest community hall. Their faces were just a mix of exhaustion and hope. You could see it. One mother who had been watching her son's case file gather dust just broke into tears. She whispered that at last she could breathe again. Another relative, a sister of a survivor, clenched her fists. She was angry that it took a random glove to bring the perpetrator into the light. Source, NPR. Their emotions were all over the place. Relief was tangled with resentment. Gratitude was shadowed by the knowledge that justice had arrived not through some tireless pursuit, but through sheer luck. The detective didn't try to justify it or anything. He just said, "Sometimes the truth finds us when we stop looking." The room just fell silent. With the weight of decades pressing on every breath, it was like the reality of the case's resolution was settling like dust on old photographs. Outside, the night sky stretched over the same suburbs that had once hidden all this terror. Now it was illuminated by the flicker of police lights heading toward the suspect's home. Law enforcement officials were celebrating the scientific triumph, but they also cautioned that the method's reliance on accidental samples meant many victims might still remain nameless. But for the families present, the moment the glove changed hands became a symbol, a fragile promise that even the darkest secrets can be exposed when the world's messiest pieces align. This whole climax, born of a junkyard's refuse, reminded everyone that justice can be as unpredictable as the streets that once concealed it. The case's accidental DNA thread sparked a nationwide debate about privacy and the power of genealogy tools. It's like, how do you balance innovation with protection, right? The conversation's still going on, and it's a reminder that every discarded object could hold the key to a story waiting to be told. Only time will tell if future investigations will rely on chance or on a deliberate hunt for truth. A lucky break can flip a cold case into front-page news, making us wonder what justice looks like when chance steps in. Take the Golden State Killer. Cops posted the crime scene DNA on an open genealogy site, hit a distant relatives match, and that curveball landed Joseph James DeAngelo in handcuffs. Source: The New York Times. A 1985 murder got its own shocker when a relative's DNA slipped into a genealogy database and finally locked Mary Jo Bailey into a life term. Source: NPR. Over in the UK, a tossed-away coffee cup produced a DNA sketch that tied a far-off relative to a 3-decade-old cold case. Source: BBC. Believe it or not, a lone 1992 cigarette but became the linchpin that crossed a genealogy platform and named the culprit. Source: The Washington Post. All these happy accidents hint that luck can rewrite unsolved crime stories, yet they also expose how shaky a reliance on chance is versus solid, repeatable science. So do we let police ride these lucky breaks, or do we pour resources into sturdy science-first pipelines that make chance discoveries the norm, not the outlier? I'm itching to hear your take. Has someone you know, or maybe you, had a surprise breakthrough that flipped an investigation on its head? Drop your story in the comments. Every viewpoint adds a layer to the conversation. If you're curious how these twists reshape the hunt for truth, smack that subscribe button and stick around for deeper dives into true crime mysteries.